ScanSource Chief Technology Officer, Greg Dixon. Greg's favorite comfort food is shepherd's pie.
So I'm aware that a number of you are a bit disappointed so far that you haven't had a really good dose of geek speak. So here I am, I'm here for you, and that's exactly what we're going to do for you. We're going to talk about cloud computing and data centers here for just a little bit. I've got a lot to say. You're going to have to really listen fast. We're going to walk through just a little bit of understanding about the cloud. And I do this because as I began to study this thing, and I realized that oddly enough, vendors tend to tell a little bit of a self-serving story at times. And whoever the provider is tends to sway the conversation a little bit one way or the other. And you know what we're about here is to be able to really tell a balanced story. So I've done a lot of work to try to sort of consolidate our understanding about this thing, and we'll go about understanding the cloud from the perspective of data centers, hosting services, what's co-location all about, what does it fit in this thing, this whole idea about virtualization. We really, I think, have a misunderstanding of what that's about. All these as-a-service offerings as well. Then to sort of follow the theme, we'll give a little weather report, the fact that it's coming, like it or not, it's going to be big, when is it coming, how big is it, and that sort of thing. And then finally, how to weather this storm. We're going to spend a good, maybe the last third of what I have to say about potential adjustments that you might want to be thinking about to your business model to be able to accommodate for this cloud perspective. And then hopefully by the end of this, I hope to get rid of some of this cloudiness and bring a little bit of understanding to what this is about. So we'll take a shot at a definition. This is the one I think that's probably shared by most folks. It's that cloud computing is really a model for enabling remote network access. So just put these words together, remote network access to a shared pool of computing resources, things like servers and storage and application software, services that go along with that. And really, when you think about this, clouds really are data centers, and you don't want to separate those things too far away from each other. The cloud's more of a concept. Data centers are more of realistic facilities. And also the cloud, though, represents the connection between all of those. And so this word cloud really comes from drawing network diagrams, and you put that cloud out there to say, well, that's the thing, I'm not sure what's in it, but it's connecting these two things, or it includes some resources that aren't part of our internal resource. And let me say, I know that a number of you folks in the room would identify yourself as primarily a voice company or maybe video conferencing specialties or data specialties, but I'm going to say to you that really what I have to say to you today about the cloud really is relevant to everyone on an equal basis. We'll go further in our definition of the cloud here by unfolding these three service models. We'll talk about 4 deployment models, as well as these 5 essential attributes, the things that really do make the cloud what it is. It's what makes the cloud profitable. It's what makes the cloud viable for end users. And so that's how we'll go about defining this. So let's look at this really from the hosting landscape perspective. And there are a lot of hosting companies out there in the world today. And so from the hosting perspective, it always starts with this on-premise. We have the on-premise traditional IT department. Most companies have this. The bigger the company, the more resources you have. And so this whole understanding has to start with an on-premise IT perspective. But now add to that co-location. And really, a colo, as they've come to call, is a facility that allows a company to outsource, to really off-source is a better word I like, to off-source some of your own IT resources. And ScanSource is a good example of this. Our corporate headquarters happens to lie right on the glide path of the Greenville-Spartanburg Airport. And so if one of those planes landed short one day, our business would have a difficult time staying afloat. So we move our IT resources off-site to a co-location facility. Happens to be in Asheville, North Carolina, about 80 or 90 miles away. And our IT resources really run there, but it's our equipment. So it really is still part of the corporate landscape. And co-locators have a wholesale perspective where you have a big co-location facility. They'll sell their resources. They're building really off to another big data center. Maybe a hosting company buys those resources from a wholesale colo, or like us, we're a retail customer of that. They provide us with all of the cooling and the power and the things necessary to run our facility, but we bring it all in. We bring in every piece of hardware. They put us in sort of a chain link fence, but we have the only key to that, and we manage it. We provide that. So on-premise and co-location are two perspectives, but now let's start to look a little bit from the hosting company's perspective. And so a hosted environment is going to have a lot of different overlaying templates here, and I want us to come to understand when you talk to a hosting company, this is the kind of conversation that you have to have. So there's an unmanaged and there's managed, and these terms should be pretty straightforward to us, right? Unmanaged simply means that the hosting company is going to provide you with this resource, this hardware, software, whatever it is, but it's up to you to manage it. You know, if one of your servers went up in a little, ball of blue smoke, the hosting company's probably not going to know about it. It's up to you to find out about that and do something with it. Whereas managed is just exactly what it says, is that managed resources are managed by the hosting company. They're going to guarantee you, uptime. They're going to guarantee you the right servers. The operating systems are always going to be at the latest levels. They're going to do load balancing for you. There's a lot of things that they will do to help manage your resources. And unmanaged is less expensive than managed. You can see how that works. Now let's put an overlay on top of this, standard versus custom. So standard means that you go to the hosting company and you will choose this particular server, this Dell server, and this operating system, and this environment that we're going to use to run that. It's absolutely standardized hardware, operating system, software, as opposed to custom. Custom allows the end customer to have some more choices. Now, I'll be honest, a lot of hosting companies have gone out of business because they were too generous with custom. They say, well, you bring in anything you want, and that's okay as long as it's custom unmanaged. But when it becomes managed custom, it's very, very hard to deal with. So most hosting companies are going to give you the option to have some choices, but maybe a choice from a menu of items. So instead of this one standard Dell server, you can choose from any of these 5 Dell servers or any of these 2 or 3 operating systems or these environments. So standard versus custom, as you can imagine, standard is less expensive to purchase than custom. Now an overlay dedicated. Dedicated simply means the hardware, the software, it's all dedicated to that particular customer. There's nobody sharing it. It's all about you, and you'll see you could have a dedicated, custom, unmanaged offering. And that's the way you would purchase the product, as opposed to shared. And shared means that it's shared by multiple resources. We'll talk more about virtualization in a minute, but shared resources means that you have a particular server and it might be shared by multiple companies. Dedicated versus shared. And as you might expect, shared is less expensive than dedicated because it's easier to manage. Now, you'll see those two wedges. They happen to sort of proceed from left to right if you think about that a little bit as a graph. And the reason I bring this up is because over time, dedicated resources from left to right will become less and less of a hosting company's offering. Whereas over time, shared resources should become a broader and more a bigger part of their offering. But realistically speaking, a hybrid solution is certainly the most likely, where a company is going to choose maybe some standardized, shared, managed kinds of resources. Other parts of what they may choose might be unmanaged. So your web servers, for instance, your websites might be in a hosted, standardized environment shared by others. Other kinds of resources might be in the more dedicated environment. Truly, though, a hybrid solution probably looks more like this. And this is the more consistent, this is the pervasive view these days, is that all companies are going to have on-premise IT resources and or co-located IT resources, again, that belong specifically to them, along with maybe some dedicated resources. Some might be standard, some might be custom, some might be shared. And so that hybrid solution is by far the most prevalent offering that we find today. And so where does the cloud fit into this discussion? So if you were to ask a hosting company, they're going to define the cloud down here in this sort of lower right-hand quadrant. To a hosting company, the cloud is shared, managed, standardized kinds of resources. And that's how they would define their cloud. And you say, I want to buy some cloud services. That's where they would position you. But honestly, if you talk to most any IT director or a CIO today, they're going to define the cloud more like this, is it really does encompass just about everything potentially that a company might represent in terms of their IT resources. All right, so let's move on to these three service models. These are terms that you've probably heard along the way. Just going to add just a little color to them. Infrastructure as a service, very straightforward. All I need for my hosting environment are hardware and software resources. Just the operating systems, the storage, the servers, the networks, the things that are fundamental to my IT needs and that are required to run the applications that I'm going to want to run. And along with this infrastructure as a service is going to come the cooling. Mike mentioned this earlier. I think the fact that power has become very expensive. And you know, if you have what we had once upon a time at ScanSource, a backhoe incident, and you have this backhoe incident out on the street, and all of a sudden your building goes dead and your communications drop dead, all the more reasons to have infrastructure, some of your infrastructure running someplace else. And so these big data centers have great resources to power. They have great cooling facilities. You know, the more IT resources, the more servers you have in your building, the more air conditioning you have to provide. And there's a real cost to that. Security, both physical and data security, network access, and you'll hear some of these companies just call that ping, power, and pipe. But that's all part of the infrastructure as a service offering. Platform as a service, great confusion over this one, but it really is for software developers. So if your company is developing a piece of software that's going to be specifically internet delivered, it's going to be a software as a service kind of an offering, then what you might purchase from the hosting company is platform as a service. All the resources, all the infrastructure, all of the middleware that goes along, the databases, all the things necessary to create that application from the start would be provided to you by a hosting company. That's called platform as a service for software developers. Finally, software as a service. This is the one that we probably know the most about, at least we think we do. Standard application software, you know, running remotely through a browser, a thin client. Good examples, you know, I had a little session at our business, and I said, so how many of you at ScanSource are cloud customers? You know, no hands. I said, well, how many of you have a Gmail account? Of course, right? Yahoo. Well, okay, that's the perfect example of a cloud application, software as a service. And so most of us probably are software as a service customers and maybe don't even know it. But software as a service, good examples are Gmail, Google Apps are a good example. Microsoft Office 360 is going to be a great one. Other examples, BroadSoft, that's voice as a service. That's certainly one that you're probably familiar with. Salesforce.com is a CRM as a service offering. Very, very straightforward. And you might consider under development your own software as a service. So if you have an application that you've been building or you're going to run, and so you might offer your own software as a service offering. So there are the three service models that help define what cloud is all about. Now let's hit these four deployment models. And I've got that picture at the bottom right there to sort of help position where these things live. So first there's this private cloud. The private cloud is exactly that. It's built and operated by a company. It's private cloud infrastructure. What turns it into a cloud infrastructure is the fact that it's virtualized. I'll talk more about that in just a second. You'll see down in the lower left where that private cloud happens to live on our graph. So private clouds, but you can also have a virtual private cloud. It's exactly the same thing, only it lives over in that hosting center. And so the hosting company can provide you with a private cloud. It's hosted by them. But you know, it also might be, that virtual private cloud might be hosted by you. And I know some of our customers in the room actually do this. It's where you'll have an application that you offer, but instead of outsourcing it to a hosting company, the actual servers are in your facility. So that's a good way to start with this thing. It's a good way to really control all the resources there and to really to maximize your profitability with that. So there's that virtual private cloud idea as well. Now we're talking a lot about virtualization, so it's time to just sort of, let's get that one out in the open here. In that left-hand environment, you'll see a traditional data center situation. In this situation, we have 5 different servers running 5 different applications, maybe running 5 different operating systems all at the same time. And so that's sort of that traditional data center, but in a virtualized data center on the right, you may see just one server running those same 5 applications. That one server could be running 5 different operating systems, and none of those applications are even aware of the fact that they're running on a virtualized server. I read that most of the servers in operation today are less than 10% utilized, really between 6 and 8% utilized. Holy smokes, think about all the processing power that's gone unused. And so what do we do with that? That's what virtualization is all about. It's about utilizing that untapped power and potential that lives inside of all the servers. And so most virtualized servers are 85 to 90% utilized. Now, a couple of terms that go along with this, we've probably heard the word multi-tenant. That's where it comes to play here. A given server may have multiple tenants, and it may have multiple companies' websites all running on the same physical piece of hardware, but each one of them is unaware of each other. So multi-tenant is a word that applies to virtualization. You may also hear these servers, these virtual servers called virtual machines or VMs, and you might say, well, that server has 5 VMs on it. One physical server, 5 VMs. You know, you can do the same thing with storage as well. You have storage units, NAS or SAN. You can share that storage unit in the same way that potentially the same way that you use with a server. And then finally, the word hypervisor, you sort of wonder where that word comes in. And so hypervisor is the piece of software that acts as the traffic cop that manages all of these different applications running on the same server. Of course, VMware really owns the market here. They were the first to come along with this. If you've been around as long as I have and sort of remember back to sort of some mainframe days, golly, this seems like the same old stuff coming back again. Is that you have one single machine with a lot of different applications running on it, and that's what VMware does. They're the big partner, but Red Hat and Citrix has their own perspective on this thing. Microsoft does this as well. So that's virtualization. When people talk about virtualization, it's really that something you can do in-house, or it's really it's one of the things that makes the cloud what it is. All right, let's move on with our deployment models here. Community cloud, something that's kind of developing these days, but if you had multiple companies with the same sort of affinity, maybe it's a group of nonprofit companies and they get together and they sort of block purchase at the hosting environment. And so a community cloud might be a group of companies who share the same kinds of resources. Again, under development. More specifically, those public cloud. And we hear most about private clouds and public clouds. And so the public cloud is exactly that, provided by the hosting company. It uses shared infrastructure. It's primarily accessed over the public internet. And it lives down in that bottom right hand side there. And as we said a minute ago, the hybrid cloud really is where most people are going to run their businesses. Some combination of these various things. Hybrid clouds are by far today the most common, and if my prediction would hold true, I think it's going to be that way forever. Very few companies, I think, would ever really be totally outsourced in this kind of an environment. However, very few companies would, in today's environment or a near future environment, are going to be strictly back on premise either. So there's going to be a balance of this. So the 4 deployment models now to the 5 essential attributes. These are the things that make cloud computing viable. These are the things that make it what it is. And so I'm going to lay these out for us here just quickly. The cloud has a promise of on-demand self-service. Now I put it that way intentionally. The cloud has a promise of on-demand self-service, which basically says that the end user of this cloud service has the ability to provision computing capabilities as needed, as opposed to the old model, which is, you order the server, you bring it in, you get the operating systems from someplace else, you spend all the time to load it all up, virtualize the whole thing, build the whole thing out, load your applications, rack and stack it, all of that. None of that is necessary with a cloud solution, or at least that's what the promise is. Broad network access. The thing I suppose that makes cloud computing where we are in our evolution today is the fact that the internet really, really has become more prevalent. It's ubiquitous. It's much faster than it used to be. It's much more secure. It's much more reliable than it was in years past. And so really cloud computing requires the idea that there's a persistent network connectivity for companies. Without that, it just couldn't live. Resource pooling is virtualization again, and so this is one of the critical factors that make cloud computing possible. Servers and storage are shared. It's all about virtualization, multi-tenancy. It's about load balancing, a real critical term for hosting companies in terms of making sure that the pipes are used well and that one server is not overutilized and another was underutilized. This is what makes the cloud affordable, is that you have shared resources. Rapid elasticity. Those are good words to stick together. But it allows a company, potentially here, an end user, to expand or scale their technology consumption at will. You get the idea that there's this big dial, in their building, and in the morning they can crank it up a little bit, and at lunch they crank it back down, and at dinner in the afternoon they crank it. But it's not nearly that simple. But again, the cloud offers the promise of this rapid elasticity, and then finally measured service. This one's big. Operational expenses, it gives a company the idea that a recurring, predictable payment model is good for a lot of companies, and they want that as opposed to capital expenditures. And really, really, the good thing for an end user is that you only pay for what you use, not for what you think you might use. This is not like a cell phone contract, where you buy so many and you use them or lose them, that kind of thing. This, you really only pay for exactly what you use at the end of the month, we'll say. So those are the 5 essential attributes of cloud computing. I'm going to set those up to the side here just a minute. And we're going to take a look at how resellers, what do those 5 essential attributes mean to a reseller? How does a reseller view those things? So first, on-demand self-service. The cloud is still complex. Mike said this. There's still a lot of mystery in this thing. And so until that happens, then value-added resellers have a huge role to play in this thing. There's still big integration opportunities and interoperability issues that have to come to play. There's change management and tons of consulting opportunities still around for, even though there's the promise of on-demand self-service, tons and tons of opportunities for resellers to inject themselves into that process. Broad network access. The fact is, I don't care how ubiquitous the internet gets and how friendly people become with it. There's always going to be that we're always going to need on-premise hardware. There's just no escaping it. So we'll never get to a place where there's no on-premise hardware. And so there will always be networking resources there as well. And so end devices and network devices all require value-added services. So always keep that in mind. No matter how ubiquitous the internet becomes, there's still all sorts of things in the business that we'll have to participate with. Resource pooling, hey, it's just a private cloud. And so from a reseller's perspective, if that's something that you participate in, then server virtualization on-premise is still the opportunity to go after there. Rapid elasticity. The idea here, though, is that, I told you could sort of turn the dial up and turn it down, but, that would be rare for companies. The fact is it's not done every day. In fact, it might only be done maybe once a year, if at all. And so when it comes time to do that, no company is going to say, okay, I hope this works, and up we go or down we go. It's just not going to work that way. Instead, users are going to call their reseller for help when it comes time to adjust those resources, if they ever really do. Now, measured service. I'm going to say account billing equals account ownership. And it's just a general sort of a term here that says the more times you communicate, the more times your customers interface with your customer, your company, the better off that relationship is. And so account billing and account ownership really go hand in hand. So I encourage you to begin to think about selling OpEx kinds of packages. Operational expense is a big part of this measured service idea. It's a big part of what end users are seeing as an advantage to them when it comes to participating in this cloud. So sell an OpEx package that's going to include things like cloud and the service and your services and software and hardware and all sorts of things. A complete offering that includes those cloud services as well. So those are the 5 essential attributes as resellers see them, and as resellers should identify your points of opportunity. And there are points of opportunity to every single one of them. Let's take those 5 same attributes now and let's perceive them from the end user's perspective for just a minute. And again, it's always best to know how end users' perspective on this. They're your customers. They're going to be the ones who have an understanding of this. So first, let me say, CompTIA did a survey, a lot of end user customers, and 56% of them said they really still don't know what this is. Someone needs to define this better if we're going to buy it. By the way, 63% of resellers gave the same answer. So it's still a bit, that's why I'm up here giving some definitions here, is to make sure that you all can come to us with a real fair and balanced kind of a definition of this thing. So end users see on-demand self-service, honestly, probably still unclear of the value proposition for that. What's it really going to, it might be good for some companies out there, but how am I going to benefit from this on-demand self-service? I don't really need, it's okay that I can wait a day or two. I don't need to turn the thing on and have it response to me in 2 hours. So a lot of companies aren't really seeing the value of on-demand self-service yet. Broad network access. Boy, no matter what you say, the internet's come a long way, baby, but there's still a lot of distrust with it, and people still don't quite trust the net. They're still thinking, well, why is my internet so slow today? Oh, it's just not running well, the poor thing, And we've come to understand about the internet. There's still a lot of distrust about it. And in this country, you pick up the phone, dial tone is a God-given right in America. We expect 5 nines of reliability when it comes to a lot of the technologies that we use. And that's what the telephone and the present networks can really give us. But I don't know if you've probably read about this. Amazon, the largest cloud provider in the world, I'm assuming, 5 big data centers in the United States. 5 big data centers serve all of North America. One of them went off the grid about a month ago. Off the grid. And I'm telling you, a lot of companies' websites just ceased to exist for some period of time, for upwards of 2 weeks, some of them. And some of them permanently lost data. They wrote this kind of a curt email to their customers saying, hello, sorry, lost your data, see you, hate to be you. And that was about it. And so, that certainly didn't do a lot of good for the trust that really is required for this. And even on Amazon's very best day, they only offer 3 nines of reliability. Do the math on that one. That's between 8 and 9 hours of downtime a year. And you don't get to choose which 8 or 9 hours they are, right? And so that's the way that works. And so there's still a lot of question about whether this internet gives us the kind of reliability that we need for this. Resource pooling. Truth is, I can do that. An end user says, I can do that. Well, ScanSource is a good example. Before we moved our equipment to a colo, we had about 135 servers in our big IT room, and we virtualized them down to about 30-some servers. So we had our own virtualization process going on. And most companies in America, I saw a thing this morning, most companies in America have a virtualization strategy going on in their own IT departments right now. So that's resource pooling, and end user says, okay, I can do that myself if I want to. Rapid elasticity, again, not done every day. Don't know if I'll ever really need to do that a lot or not. Not sure the value proposition of rapid elasticity. But measured service, hey, end users like this idea. If OpEx can save me some money, I'm all for it. I like the idea. A lot of companies have certain attributes that really make them good candidates for this kind of a service. I was on the plane with a guy in Washington this past week who said that he was from California. The state government of California absolutely, of course, they're $28 billion in debt, but they have an absolute mandate. If you want if you want software, you have to buy software as a service. No excuses, no exceptions. And so whole states are doing that. And so software as a service, this measured, pay-as-you-go kind of an environment is a good thing. I mentioned here these accounting rules change. I'll talk about that here in just a minute. But it's something that end users are having to perceive of here and when they make cloud decisions. Now, just some quick statistics here. 50 billion servers in the world. In a couple of years, they're saying that 10% of those servers will be virtualized with 10 VMs per server. Now, do the math on that. It says that you can double the number of available servers every 2 years. So the growth potential is tremendous here. Half of all the 8 million servers sold every year go into these public data centers, like the one you see there in the bottom left-hand corner. That's Apple's new data center, built outside of Maiden, North Carolina. Anybody know where Maiden, There's one Hardee's restaurant in Maiden, North Carolina. But Apple's just opened it just in the last couple of weeks, 1 million square feet in that data center. Google says they have 1 million servers, 10 million in 10 years. And of the 33,000 data centers on the planet, 23,000 of them are in the United States. Of course, you want to hear from Gartner, right? And Gartner says that the global market for cloud computing, $40 billion in 2011, $150 in a couple of years, $241 billion. Look at the growth in less than 10 years. Of course, Merrill Lynch says $160 billion in 2011. Why are those numbers so different there? I think it's probably because they're defining the cloud differently, I'm thinking. I don't know how those numbers could be that different. AMI research says that 5 million, I'm sorry, what is that? That SMBs will amount to $100 million by 2014, just SMB companies. And so the largest growth potential, by the way, is with this small to medium-sized business. And of course, software as a service revenue is going to grow 5 times faster than traditional packaged product software, which, by the way, is in serious decline, the sales of traditional packaged software. So no matter how you define it, no matter how the numbers are, the fact is that the cloud's big and getting bigger fast. It's the fastest growing area of IT spending over all others. This word, disruptive technology, probably means different things to different people, but the fact is that the cloud, you might perceive of the cloud as a disruptive technology, something that's sort of a game changer in the technology world. And so end users perceive it along these lines. End users see it they see disruptive as a good thing, because they might see it as a means to disrupt what they perceive to be unfair software licensing practices. You know, you may not have to pay 20% of the original cost every single year just to make this thing run. You know, and that's the end user's perspective. How do they, they see this as a way to sort of upset some of those hardware acquisition patterns and obsolescence requirements that people say that they're required to have here, and replacement upgrade schedules. They see OpEx as advantageous to CapEx in a lot of ways. And so I was sitting in a QBR here with Mike over here recently, and you brought this up, and so I did a little study, Mike. I got some of our folks, and this FASB, Federal Accounting Standards Board, has proposed changes around how companies account for leased equipment. And so the rules here say that, so there are some rules that are introduced this year that are going to be perhaps effective next year that say that companies who lease equipment, who lease servers and equipment, or lease buildings in cars. So if you're leasing equipment, you're going to have to capitalize those assets and the corresponding liabilities on your financial statements. And the result of that is a lot of results to that. I had a long list of negative results, but one of them is it makes it harder to borrow money. And so you see that companies who are traditionally leasing equipment, all of a sudden cloud computing really looks like a good opportunity for them because it's a service model and there's nothing to capitalize. And so I think I heard Mike say he thought it was the number one driver for cloud, to drive us toward cloud computing. Forget all the technology and all the other stuff. This is going to be big over the next couple of years. Did I get that right? I did, didn't I? So here's how I want to wrap this. I want to take a few minutes. I want to talk about some business transformation ideas. Now, not to say you have to do any of these things, but I'm just going to give you some ideas that if you're interested in sort of embracing cloud computing as a service, as an offering, if you want to be a part of this space, then these are some of the kinds of things that you might want to begin to think about. So you ask yourself, so how do I make money with this? So just keep in mind that cloud is really it's a service model, and certainly you're already accustomed to how to sell a service model. It's part and parcel of what you do today. So just put cloud in along with your other services. Sell solutions that include cloud as a service, along with other services that you already do. So it included as part of a whole solution. Embrace this monthly billing model if you can. If you can. The thinking is that you can charge more if you charge by the month. And so that's some prevailing thinking. But look at it, instead of thinking about the billing aspects of it, turn that back around to a positive perspective and see it as a recurring revenue stream. It starts to sound a little better now as you perceive this as a recurring revenue stream. How do I pay my salespeople? This is one that we struggle with. You know, you're used to this sort of big cash deal up front. In comes a chunk of money. You slice off a piece and give it to your sales rep. It's their commission. They're used to being paid that way. But when it comes to selling really cloud services, you have to think a little more along the lines of the agent model. A lot of you are aware of how that works. The agent model in the telecommunications business, or if you're not, maybe the life insurance business, and how life insurance salespeople are paid on an annuity model. And in the first year, you pay them 10% of some number. In the second year, maybe you pay them 5% of that number. And maybe the third year, you pay them 0, or maybe a very small, maybe 1% on a regular basis. And so that prevents someone from just building up a clientele and, going to the beach. That you have to continue to bring in new business at that point. Or if you say, well, this is really disruptive to my whole sales team, how's it going to work? Go out and find you a rainmaker. Some, young person, give them a new comp plan, send them out there in the world and say, don't come back without some cloud. And so let them go out and sell some cloud business, right? And build up that practice and then show that as a positive model for the rest of the team. And then you can integrate that in the rest of your sales team as you go along. So make a business plan. Write this thing down, okay? Stick it in your head and say it probably shouldn't be on there someplace. It shouldn't be. So accept this, write it down, put it in your drawer, take the thing out, add things to it as you learn, as you go along, as you build this model. And begin to talk to your customers about it slowly. Listen, don't wait for them to call you. That would be a bad thing, okay? Don't wait for a customer to call you up and say, hey, I'm ready for this cloud thing. I haven't heard, what are you doing? And trust me, duh's the wrong answer when you get that phone call. And so be prepared for that and start to have these conversations with your key customers about the cloud. What are you thinking in terms of these? What sort of things can we better supply you with? And so talk to your customers about it and shift your customer base gradually. It's not something you want to do overnight, all at once. Some big mass email, hey, come and get it. But start to talk about it slowly and work your way work your way through your customer base. And Mike's phrase and mine too, where there's mystery, there's margin. Don't give this away. It may seem cheap. It may seem low margin. It may seem, like I said, it's disruptive in a lot of ways. But don't give it away, especially in the early stages here. If you start low, it's only going to lower. So build this up front with a good profit margin on it, and don't be ashamed of that. Keep in mind that cloud services tend to be sticky. That means that they tend to stay over time. Cloud services tend to be viral. That means that one cloud thing leads to another cloud thing, leads to another. But also remember that cloud services tend to commoditize more rapidly than other things. And the reason for this is because there's so much information out there about it, so much that people can read. Now, again, a lot of times it's a little bit self-serving by whoever's presenting the message there, and you have to filter things carefully, and we can help do that. But the mystery is going to tend to go out of this thing a little faster than most kinds of services. So get in early, profit early, and continue to drive the value into that space. Don't just give up and say, well, the bottom's going to fall out next year, so forget about it. Continue to drive the value in these things. We've been involved with that for years and years, where we said people predicted that our older products were going to really commoditize so fast, and we would be out of business in 10 years. But it hadn't happened. It is because we demand and we require that the value-added model still prevail. What do I sell? So own the relationship, okay? Own the relationship with your customer. For heaven's sakes, don't let your customer go directly to the hosting company. Listen, it's so easy. You heard us talk a minute ago about disintermediation. When it talks about disintermediation, that's all of us in the room. And so hosting companies make it very easy. Listen, Yahoo and Google, perfect examples. Google wants to go straight to the end user and give their services away. That's a model you have to sort of war against. And so own the relationship when it comes to cloud computing with your customers and get in front of them. Private label the cloud offering. You can do that. Most hosting companies allow you to private label. This is not, Amazon's service, but it's my service, and you're getting it from me. And don't sell the cloud. The cloud's not something to be sold. It's just a delivery mechanism. That's all it is. It's like saying, well, I'm selling highways, I'm not selling cars, okay? Sell the cars, not the highway. Your message to your customers are going to start to sound like things like this. You're going to begin to say things like, look, I can improve your efficiency and your productivity. I can improve your business communications. You'll get a better business outcome as a result of some of these services. And we're going to save you money. I can provide you with things like redundancy and backup and data security, business continuity. Those are great offerings that you can provide now that are perhaps net new to what you can do today. And I can give you scalable services. There's all this talk about scalable, but I can do that for you. I'm really the one who has their hand on the dial for you, and I can dial these things up and down for you at will because I can get good at it. And lastly, I'm your cloud provider. That's an important message. I'm your cloud provider. You, the reseller, need to say that to your end user customers. I'm your cloud provider. And here's how that might look. So you can first be the cloud. Okay. Now I'm not saying you should compete with Rackspace or Amazon or any of these guys, but when your customer thinks about the cloud, they need to think about you. Okay, not some other company, but you. So to your customers, you are the cloud. So you can be the cloud to your customers, or you can sell the cloud. You can also sell the cloud to your customers, and that's these cloud services. Some really basic things like you can sell email by the seat. Small company needs a quick email solution. Very, very easy to turn that up. Email by the seat. You can sell collaboration services, SharePoint, those kind of things. You can sell these sort of synchronized Dropbox kinds of services where it syncs up your data and backs it up to an appropriate place. You can sell raw data storage if you're doing, video surveillance video or those sorts of things. Backup and redundancy services. Those are just the basic services these are the basic cloud services that you can sell. A little more advanced to that, you can sell web hosting. Your customer needs web hosting. You say, I can do that. Not they can do that, but I can do that. Okay? Web hosting, cloud servers. You need those infrastructure as a service? I'm your resource. I can sell you infrastructure as a service. Content delivery, or these as a service offerings. Hosted VoIP, video conferencing as a service, unified UC as a service. All available, video surveillance, other kinds of things. So you want those things, Mr. Customer? Look, I'm your resource for that. And then now plug in your cloud services to go along with that. Things like perhaps your own software as a service offering. Maybe even you host it or you outsource it to a hosting company. The fact is, it doesn't matter. You can do implementation services, training, moves, adds, changes, all the usual kinds of things still apply here. So you can be the cloud, you can sell the cloud, you can sell to the cloud. Now, that's selling into data centers. And when you think of data centers, you may think about pictures like this, racks and racks and rows of servers and storage and all the blinking lights and the big air conditioners running in the background and lots of wiring. That may be your perspective on data centers. That's fine. Maybe a little more like this one, right? A little more of a traditional sort of a backroom model. Probably something between the two is more accurate. So when it comes to selling to the cloud, I'm going to say selling to data centers. And the fact is, most of the cloud still exists today inside an enterprise's four walls, or certainly if not in their co-location facility, which is virtually their own four walls. It's their own equipment. And so that's where most of the data center lives still today. These two pictures that you see here are pictures of the ScanSource IT department. Scott got a little nervous there. Settle down though, Scott. I'm okay with this. I got permissions. And so this is in our co-location facility up in Asheville, North Carolina. That rack that you see on the right here in the bottom right-hand corner, or that upper left picture, that rack currently runs our entire North American operation. The rack you see on the left down there at the bottom, that will run. That's our new ERP implementation. That's the whole of our resources. But let me tell you, 95% of the equipment you see in that room, we bought from VARs. Whoa, you guys have all these direct relationships. Surely you bought that stuff direct. Nope, we did not. We buy from VARs for the same reason that most companies buy from VARs, is that we want that implementation expertise. We want that help when we need it. We want someone to bring in some expertise for us to count on. We want one throat to choke, right? We do business with VARs for the same reason anybody else does. And so that kind of a data center, and that's probably more traditional, the kind of data center you guys might be familiar with, is the one that looks just like ours. So get to know this data center market. Don't overblow it and don't underblow it. Just get to understand where it really lives and embrace and support the vendor's data center message. So we're talking to JC from Avaya's data center practice here a little while ago, and I'm saying to them, guys, we need to understand your data center message so that we get on board, and you need to do the same thing. If it's Avaya or if it's Juniper or if it's Extreme, choose them all or choose one, but understand what their message is and get on board with it. Develop a specialty there. You may not say, well, I do it all. I only do certain parts of it. Maybe I do governance or compliance or switching or whatever it is. Or you may put together a whole package of products that include virtualization and servers and software and the like. So that's how to sell into data centers. Last slide. So here it is. Be nimble, but be prepared. Okay, that's the best way to understand, I think, this is be nimble, but be prepared. You remember convergence? It was 5 or 6 or 7 years that we had to embrace that. This is a model that's going to be here, and we have to embrace it in 12 to 24 months. And so be nimble, be prepared. Change is inevitable, and so is the cloud. It is coming. It's part of what our future holds. We need to put a positive spin on it. We need to embrace it. We need to really understand how to make money on it. And you can weather the storm if you're prepared, and we can help do that. And so Mike Fernie is going to come up in just a second. He's going to help answer that next question about how it is that we're prepared to do this. I really appreciate your time. I hope it didn't overgeek you. Thanks very much.